I sat at the end of the table, fork still in my hand, as my daughter-in-law announced it, like she was reading a grocery list. Your son and I decided you'll get 1 meal a day from now on. The words landed heavier than the cold-baked ziti on my plate. After feeding their family for years, after paying their bills when no one else would, after building the very roof over their heads, I had been reduced to rations in my own home. 1 meal. That was what I was worth. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The fork hit the ceramic with a soft clink, echoing too loud in the quiet. The dining room lights buzzed faintly overhead, the kind of flicker you only noticed when no one dared to speak. Tina sat at the head of the table, spine straight, hands folded, eyes scanning each face like a foreman clocking inefficiencies. The baked ziti on her plate, lopsided from being scraped from a near-empty tray, steamed faintly in the cold air. It was Ruth's turn to cook. She'd done her best, even added extra cheese from the stash she wasn't supposed to touch. No one thanked her. Tina cleared her throat. From now on, she said, voice flat, 1 meal a day. The words dropped like a trapdoor opening under them. Mia froze, her plastic fork halfway to her mouth. Caleb looked down at his plate, cheeks flushed, jaw set. He nodded once, like he understood. No, like he agreed. Or didn't dare not to. Ruth, across from him, didn't flinch. She lifted a bite to her mouth and chewed slowly, her eyes locked forward, steady, unblinking. Not at Tina, not at anyone, just forward. Her silence wasn't surrender, it was survival. Mia looked across the table at her sister. Her lips moved soundlessly. I'm sorry. Ruth didn't respond. She didn't blink. She swallowed, set her fork down neatly, and dabbed at the corner of her mouth with a paper towel. Like they were at a restaurant, like dignity was the only currency she had left. Tina stood up. Starting tomorrow, lunch only. If you're hungry before or after, drink water. She picked up her plate, took 2 steps toward the kitchen, and added, without turning, no seconds. I'm not running a charity. The kitchen light clicked on. Ruth didn't look back. Caleb sat like he wanted to disappear into the fabric of the chair. Mia wiped her eyes quickly, pretending it was an itch. No one moved. No one challenged. The news spread through the house like mold. Quiet, creeping, sour. Gloria didn't find out until after her late shift at the group home. She stumbled in near midnight, hair still pinned, scrubs wrinkled and coffee-stained. Ruth was at the table, studying under the lamp, a biology textbook open, a yellow legal pad filled with diagrams, notes in small, steady handwriting. Where's dinner? Gloria asked, dropping her purse. Ruth didn't look up. There's cereal. Gloria stared at her. Seriously. Ruth just turned the page. A pause. Then, what the hell happened now? Ruth hesitated, then said it with no emotion. 1 meal a day. Tina's rule. Gloria scoffed so hard it turned into a bitter laugh. She's budgeting cruelty now? That's new. Ruth didn't argue, didn't say don't make noise, didn't say she'll hear you, didn't say anything. She just flipped the page again. Upstairs, past the creaky stairs and the poster-covered hallway, Ruth sat alone on the floor of the room she shared with Mia. The single lamp cast a warm yellow cone onto the carpet. Mia had fallen asleep, earbuds in, a stuffed elephant clutched against her chest. Ruth opened the drawer under her bed and pulled out the blue notebook with the gold lettering she'd bought months ago, back when she still allowed herself ideas like summer plans. The cover read, Household 2025. She'd written it as a joke back then, a fake planner. Inside were bullet points like Gloria moves out with a girlfriend who cooks, and Caleb starts therapy and finally grows a spine. But now it wasn't funny. She flipped past the doodles, the sarcasm, the angry lists. She turned to a blank page, and she began to write. Rule number 1, keep your strength. Weakness makes you predictable. Rule number 2, don't defend the others. They'll fold if it means staying warm. Rule number 3, track everything, food, words, time. She paused, then added, Rule number 4, never give her the satisfaction of watching you break. She closed the notebook, held it tight to her chest, and listened to the cold silence of the house. Somewhere downstairs, the plumbing clicked, pipes shifting in the walls like bones cracking under weight. Ruth didn't flinch. Her eyes were wide open, and she was done pretending this was just going to pass. The bank lobby smelled like printer paper and lemon-scented floor wax. Clean, impersonal, neutral. It was just after 10 a.m., and the place had that stillness of a weekday morning, like time had slowed just long enough for the world to reset. Ruth stood in line with her backpack slung tight over one shoulder, her notebook tucked into the inner sleeve. Inside, she'd wedged her last 2 pay stubs from the campus tutoring program and the bank documents Tina made her sign last year. To make things easier, Tina had said. But nothing Tina ever did was just easier. The fluorescent lights above made her eyes sting, but she didn't rub them. Her fingers were too tightly gripping the envelope in her hand. A laminated sign nearby read, "Smile, you're on camera." Ruth didn't. When it was her turn, she stepped up to the counter and quietly cleared her throat. "I need to close a joint account and open a new one. Just me. Solo." The teller looked up, mid-30s, soft curls pinned behind her ears, a nameplate that read Candace. Her brows lifted a little, but she nodded. "Do you have your ID and the account info?" Ruth handed them over with practiced calm. Candace scanned the info, tapped a few keys, then paused. "This is a shared account," she said carefully. "Do you have authorization to—" Ruth unzipped her backpack and pulled out a navy blue ledger, spiral-bound, battered from use. She flipped to the section labeled Deposits, Independent, and showed Candace 2 neat columns of numbers. Every paycheck, every note, tutoring, hours signed by Dean Merrill. Initials, dates. Candace leaned forward. "You track everything?" Ruth nodded. "I don't like relying on memory." Something shifted in Candace's face. Maybe recognition, maybe respect. She straightened up. "I'll help you open a new solo account," she said. "We'll move your funds over today, but heads up, if the co-owner notices the withdrawal, you might hear about it." Ruth nodded once. "I know." The text came at 3:42 p.m. "Tina, are you out of your damn mind? That money isn't just yours. You think because you bought a few noodles you're grown? I'll have the bank reverse it. You want to talk disloyalty? I made you." A second message buzzed in before the first one even stopped stinging. "Don't forget who owns that roof. You're acting bold for someone who's still sleeping in my house." Ruth didn't respond. She just printed them. All of them. From the bank receipt to Tina's first insult to her last half-threat. She 3-hole punched the stack and slid it into a labeled binder. File, Tina Communications, Q4, 2025. Gloria walked by the table just as Ruth was snapping the binder shut. She stopped, leaned in, took one look at the folder title, and gave a low, impressed whistle. "Well, damn," she said. "Starting your paper trail, honey?" Ruth gave a tight smile. "Figure it's about time." Gloria nodded, reaching over to gently smooth a wrinkle from the front page. "That's how you build a case. You make it so clean, even she can't explain it away." Then softer. "Just make sure you back it up. Flash drive, off-site." Ruth already had, but she didn't say it. She just tapped the folder once, like sealing a pact. At the small corner store near the bus stop, Ruth stood in front of the canned goods like she was solving a puzzle. She held a basket in one arm. Inside, rice, peanut butter, instant oatmeal, a bunch of bananas slightly too ripe to last the week. At checkout, she paid in cash. The receipt printed out with a faint chirp. Total, $14.82. She took a pen from her bag, circled the number twice, then folded it with deliberate care and slid it into her notebook. Not because it was remarkable, but because it was hers. Every cent. Back home, she stepped quietly through the front door. No one else was around. Mia still at school. Caleb probably hiding in the basement. Tina's car gone. But Ruth didn't head upstairs. She made a sharp turn into the garage instead, flipping the light. The laundry machines sat still and dusty. But next to them was the old locked cabinet Tina used for documents, the kind she never let anyone near. Ruth crouched, pulled a bobby pin from her ponytail, and bent it slowly between her fingers. She didn't know what was inside. but she was about to find out. Ruth hadn't even finished her eggs the next morning when Caleb slid a manila envelope onto the table like it was nothing. No greeting, no warning. For emergencies, he said, not quite looking at her. Just in case. She wiped her mouth with a napkin, slow and precise, then glanced down at the envelope. Legal-sized, thick paper. Her name scrawled on the front in his unmistakably crooked handwriting. She didn't touch it. "What kind of emergency?" she asked quietly. He shifted in his chair. "I mean, if anything happened to Tina. You know how things are. She just wants someone she trusts to carry things forward. In the event of a medical situation or—" "Why me?" Ruth interrupted. "Wouldn't that be you?" Caleb blinked. Once. Twice. "She thinks you'd be more organized." That wasn't a compliment. That was a trap. She reached out, tapped the envelope once with her fingernail, and then slid it gently back toward him. "I'll pass." There was a beat of silence. Caleb's mouth twitched, like he'd rehearsed a dozen reactions, but none of them quite fit the rejection. Behind him, in the kitchen doorway, Tina stood half-shadowed, arms folded tight across her chest. She hadn't been there a minute ago. "You're refusing to sign a basic protection for this family," she said, voice brittle. Ruth didn't flinch. "I'm saying I won't sign anything I haven't reviewed on my own time." "It's not a contract, it's a safeguard," Tina snapped, stepping in now, the air shifting with her presence. "You're being dramatic." Ruth stood. Not fast, but with the same silent control she'd been practicing since the ZD night. "Then there's no rush, right?" Mia, sitting on the couch across the room, phone half hidden in her lap, angled the camera just slightly. She tapped the red record button. Later that evening, Gloria lit a cigarette she wouldn't smoke and held it like punctuation between her fingers as she waited on the law office's steps. "This guy's sharp," she said, watching Ruth approach. "Used to handle restraining orders for survivors. Knows how to read between the ink." The attorney's nameplate on the glass door read, "Daniel Price, J.D., Family and Civil Matters." Inside, the office smelled like old law books and new printer cartridges. Ruth sat across from Daniel, late 40s, clean-cut, calm hands. He wore a navy sweater instead of a suit, and listened like it was a muscle he'd trained. She handed over the power of attorney packet. "They said it was just for emergencies." He skimmed the first page, then the second, then stopped cold at page 4. His brow creased. "This isn't standard language," he said, tapping a paragraph in the middle column. "This clause, unilateral discretion over financial access and asset recovery. That's not emergency protocol. That's control." He flipped further. "And this phrasing, preemptive consent for medical proxy decisions, is legally aggressive, borderline coercive, especially if you live in the same household." Ruth said nothing, just watched his fingers underline the sentences Tina had tried to slip past her, each word like a wire being clipped. Daniel sat back. "I can prepare a counterfiling, something to legally revoke any implied consent you never gave, but I'll need you to authorize me formally." Ruth reached into her notebook, pulled out a pen, signed. Her hand didn't shake. That night, back in her room, Ruth opened the folder labeled Tina Communications and slid in the day's editions. She printed the still frame Mia had sent her, Tina, mid-argument, eyes wild, Caleb flinching behind her. A timestamp in the corner. Silent proof. She added a new section tab. Attempts to establish legal control. Then she stared at the page for a long moment. There was still one document left she hadn't reviewed. Not the power of attorney one. The one she found yesterday in the locked cabinet, tucked between expired car titles and old tax forms. She reached under her bed, retrieved the hidden folder, and pulled it open. It was a birth certificate, not hers. It listed a name she'd never seen before, and Tina as the mother. The first whisper came through church, a side hug from Sister Eileen after service. Tight smile, too tight. "Heard you've been making things hard at home, sweetie. Teenagers and their tempers, I suppose." Ruth blinked. She wasn't a teenager, but she nodded once, thanked her for the blessing, and turned before her face could show anything. 2 pews up, Tina was all pearls and choir voice charm, laughing with the deacon's wife like she hadn't just sent fire into the bloodstream of a whole room. By Monday, it had spread to Facebook. Tina didn't tag her, of course. She was too careful for that. But the posts were surgical. You do everything for someone and they still treat you like an enemy. Some people need to learn loyalty the hard way. When someone bites the hand that feeds, maybe it's time to let them starve. The comments rolled in. Church ladies and PTA moms clucking hearts and praise hands. You're so strong, sis. Family is hard. Praying for peace in your house. Ruth didn't comment, didn't react. She took screenshots, every post, every like, every timestamp, saved them to a folder on her flash drive, printed hard copies with time and date headers, labeled each one in the binder under public narrative manipulation. Daniel had warned her this could happen. When people like Tina lose control behind closed doors, they reach for the court of public opinion, he'd said. But I'm not in that court, I'm in the courthouse. And he was right. That week, he filed a protective notice with the county clerk's office, a proactive declaration regarding Ruth's personal earnings and assets. If Tina tried to stake claim, attach financial dependency, or fabricate paperwork, the filing would flag it. I can't stop her from talking, Daniel had told her, but I can make sure it's her mouth moving, not her pen. On Thursday, Mia tossed a flyer on Ruth's desk. It was hand-drawn in marker, edges wrinkled from being folded and refolded. Meal share? No ID, no judgment, just food. She hovered in the doorway, hoodie half-zipped, backpack sliding off one shoulder. They need volunteers Saturday. I signed up. You should come. Ruth raised an eyebrow. Thought you hated mornings. Mia smirked. I do, but I hate her more. It was as close as she'd come to naming Tina lately. Ruth didn't push. She just nodded. The church basement smelled like chili and cornbread. Folding tables lined the walls, steam rising off aluminum trays. Teenagers in hairnets stirred pots, while volunteers in branded tees packed brown bags like clockwork. Ruth found herself drawn to the serving line, stationed beside an older woman named Lois, who handed out milk cartons and compliments in equal measure. They came in steady streams, unhoused men with windburned cheeks, quiet moms with kids clinging to their jackets, a trio of teen boys pretending not to be hungry. Ruth served rice, smiled, wiped the counter between plates. She said things like, "You want extra?" and "Stay warm out there," and meant every word. She noticed the way people met her eyes, like they weren't used to being seen. Not really. Later, when the trays were empty and the floor swept clean, Ruth sat in the back, watching a volunteer reorganize leftover bread. Mia slumped beside her, sweat on her collar and a satisfied look on her face. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" she asked. Ruth didn't answer right away. She was remembering Tina's budget cuts, her smug decree about 1 meal a day, watching Mia mouth, "I'm sorry," from across the table, watching Caleb lower his head like guilt could make him invisible. She looked around the room. No one here had power, but everyone had a plate. She turned to Mia. "I think I am." Back home, Gloria was at the stove, warming soup she'd brought home from her job, the good kind, from a nurse with a crock-pot and a conscience. Ruth pulled the folded flyer from her coat pocket, set it on the table. Gloria glanced over, nodded slowly. Then she ladled out 3 bowls. As Ruth took her seat, Gloria handed her a spoon and said, "If they feed you scraps, baby, feed others feasts." Ruth didn't speak, but she picked up her pen, and somewhere in Household 2025, a new plan started to take shape. Daniel's office was warmer than usual. The heater buzzed faintly from the vent above the bookshelf, where legal volumes sat like sentinels, thick, silent, and full of every battle someone had already fought and won. Ruth sat at the long oak table, a mug of chamomile cooling beside her untouched. Her binder was open to a fresh tab marked Future Allocations. This time, there were no screenshots, no receipts, no copies of Tina's manipulation, just handwritten notes, 3 pages, lined and numbered. Daniel adjusted his reading glasses, eyes scanning the draft Ruth had typed and printed. "This is clean," he said, flipping through the pages. "Detailed, legally sound." Then he paused. "Are you sure about this line?" he asked, tapping the inheritance clause. Ruth nodded. "Yes, that number's not an accident." Daniel read aloud. "To Caleb Ellison and Tina Ellison, the amount of $14.82 to be split evenly." Ruth leaned back in her chair. It's what I spent the first day I bought food for myself. After I cut them off. Daniel let out a soft, surprised laugh. Not mocking. More like admiration wrapped in disbelief. You're using poetic math, Mrs. Ellison. Seems fair, Ruth said, expression steady. They both treated me like I was worth less than that. Now they can divide it. He turned to the next page. You've assigned the remainder of your estate to Ozark Community Kitchen, she said, finishing the sentence for him. Specifically to fund weekday lunches for seniors, the kind who can't drive or live alone. Daniel whistled under his breath. That's a serious legacy move, Ruth shrugged. They didn't treat me like family, but those folks did. Even if they didn't know they were doing it. He looked at her across the table, something different in his eyes now, not the usual guarded concern of a lawyer managing a client's crisis. This was respect. Executor? Gloria, she said. She knows how to fight, and she knows how to finish. Contingency? Mia, Ruth said. But only for education-related needs. Not direct access. Not until she's older. Daniel nodded slowly. Smart. He reached for the notary stamp, clicked his pen twice, and tapped the desk. Last step's the signature. You sure you're ready? Ruth didn't hesitate. She took the pen, signed her full name in steady loops, and slid the document across. The notary witnessed, stamped, sealed. Daniel clipped it all into a folder marked Will R. Ellison, 2025, and slid a copy across the table. She tucked it into her binder, just behind the public narrative tab. As she zipped the binder shut, Daniel leaned forward, elbows resting on the table, and said, Most people write wills with fear or guilt. You wrote yours with math and mercy, Ruth smiled. Fair portions for all. And she meant every word. The waiting room smelled like antiseptic and copier paper, pale green walls, framed degrees. Chairs spaced just far enough apart to signal this was serious. Ruth sat in one of them, legs crossed, her navy binder resting on her lap like a briefcase. The notebook inside had a new tab now. Medical Proceedings, 2025. The receptionist called her name gently, and she rose without hesitation. Dr. Valerio's office was painted a calming blue, lined with abstract paintings of trees and bridges. Metaphors for memory, Ruth supposed. He didn't smile much, but he didn't frown either. Just watched her closely, like every blink had a weight to it. We're going to run a standard cognitive assessment, he said. Some logic puzzles, short-term recall, basic pattern recognition. You'll do fine. I know, Ruth said simply. He raised an eyebrow. Confidence is half the battle. Ruth shrugged. I fought harder ones. The first test involved shape rotation, figures on a grid, some mirrored, some flipped. She answered before he finished the question. Next was number sequences, then vocabulary categorization, then a visual memory test, match pairs from a flipped deck of cards. Ruth didn't miss a single one. When he moved to scenario-based reasoning, if you were managing a household budget with limited income, Ruth cut him off with a spreadsheet-level breakdown of line item priorities, including buffer zones for inflation and cost of living drift. Dr. Valerio sat back after 45 minutes and folded his hands together. Is there anything you struggle with cognitively? Ruth considered it. Sometimes I over-prepare. He smiled at that. 2 days later, Gloria came in from her shift, dropped her purse by the door, and waved a fat envelope in the air like it was a winning lottery ticket. They tried it, she said, eyes gleaming. Petitioned for a wellness review behind your back, framing it as concern. Tried was the right word. Gloria dropped the contents on the kitchen table, copies of Ruth's evaluation, a nutrition log from her meal share volunteering, grocery receipts, and charts Ruth had printed from her food tracking app. Judge barely glanced at it, Gloria said. Dr. Valerio's report shredded their claim. Ruth flipped through the pages. One line from the summary stood out in bold. Subject demonstrates full executive function and above-average strategic cognition. No intervention warranted. Daniel's office was quieter than usual when they dropped off the documents. He scanned the paperwork and gave a single, satisfied nod. This kind of response from a judge usually takes weeks, he said. Tina must have overplayed her hand. She always does, Ruth said. Caleb hadn't shown up in court. Gloria said he'd spent the day cleaning the garage in silence, like it was some kind of penance. But Tina had been there, chin high, eyes tight, mouth frozen in that exact shade of disbelief she wore when the world didn't bend for her. Ruth hadn't spoken a word in the courtroom. She hadn't needed to. Back at home, Ruth made dinner, her own. A simple bowl of rice, eggs, steamed spinach, and sesame oil. Balanced, protein-rich, unassuming. She sat at the table alone and folded her napkin across her lap. Then she placed one of her old printed nutrition charts beside the plate, just for herself. She took a bite, chewed slowly, then quietly to no one in particular. She said, "One meal of humility, served." She didn't smile, she didn't gloat, she just ate. The chill crept in like smoke, thin, invisible, but suddenly everywhere. Ruth woke to frost on the inside of the window glass and a thermostat blinking red. She pulled on a sweater, checked the hallway vent. Cold. Dead. The silence was louder than the outage itself. Downstairs, the gas stove wouldn't click on. No water heater hum. The pilot was out. Everything was off. Not a blackout, just her side of the meter. She opened her notebook to a fresh page. Wrote the date, circled it. January 14th, 2025. Interior temp, 52 degrees. Pilot light cold. Stove inactive. Then she took photos. Of the thermostat, of the stove, of the panel in the basement. She opened the fuse box, saw nothing tripped. Caleb had been down here the day before. Said he was checking the laundry line. Ruth didn't touch anything, just added, "No visible mechanical failure. Access tampering suspected." Then she called the city utility. "Ma'am, we're showing a service cancellation request from your address," the rep said. "Filed online last week." Ruth's jaw didn't clench. Her voice didn't rise. "That was unauthorized," she said. "I'd like the account restored immediately, under my name only, a beat. We'll send someone within the hour. And I'd like to file a theft of service report," she added. The woman hesitated. "You believe someone in the household canceled the utilities to deprive you of heat?" "I have documentation," Ruth said. And she did. Gloria didn't ask questions when Ruth showed up on her porch with a duffel bag and binder. Just unlocked the door and said, "Coffee's already on?" By noon, word had gotten around. A neighbor from 2 houses down stopped by with an extra blanket. A retired math teacher from Ruth's old school emailed offering a space heater and an affidavit if needed. The shift manager from Mealshare texted, "Heard what happened. If you need hours covered, we got you. Also, we're behind you." Ruth hadn't asked for any of it, but it came anyway. Mia called that evening. Gloria handed Ruth the phone with one eyebrow raised. "She's not here," Mia said quietly. "Tina kicked me out for the night. Said I was taking sides." "I'm sorry," Ruth said. "I'm not," Mia replied. Then added, "I messaged Grandma. Mom's crossed the line. She needs to hear it from someone she can't mute." Ruth didn't ask what the message said. She just exhaled. Daniel didn't blink when she handed him the photos and documentation. "She went after heat?" he asked, scanning her notes. "She went after basic human need," Ruth said. He tapped the desk. "Then it's time to escalate." Within 36 hours, Daniel filed for a temporary protective order, naming household tampering as targeted coercion. It requested immediate prohibition of future interference, retroactive review of utility records, and restricted access to property where Ruth resided. "This is no longer a family issue," he said. "This is systemic abuse." The judge approved it without a hearing. Tina was served in public at 2:47 p.m. on her own birthday, while leaving the cafe where she'd staged a lunch with church friends. The process server handed her the envelope mid-sentence. She tried to brush it off, eyes darting to see who was watching. But one woman had her phone out. Another raised an eyebrow. Someone whispered. Tina went still, not angry, not loud, just cornered. She opened the envelope, scanned the first line, and Ruth knew, without having to witness it, that for the first time, Tina finally understood what it felt like to be powerless. The post came fast this time, furious, frantic, and hollow. Screenshots circulated through the group chats like ash blown through vents. Tina, flanked by pastel emojis and cursive Bible verses, posted 3 times in 24 hours. each one more desperate than the last. The devil works hard, but bitter hearts work harder. You think you know someone until they turn your whole family against you. I've always stood in love. Always. Not everything that glitters is gold, especially in courtrooms full of liars. Ruth didn't respond. She printed them. Each one, screenshot, date, timestamp, comment totals, username metadata. She created a new tab in her binder, Digital Defamation, Phase 2. Daniel's eyes narrowed when he saw the stack. She's not even trying to hide the implication anymore. She's not subtle, Ruth replied. He nodded. That helps. The pastor came by that Thursday. Reverend Polk, silver-haired, slow-moving, always smelled faintly of cedar and coffee grounds. He'd baptized Ruth when she was 10, prayed over her when her father died, and read from Isaiah at Caleb's confirmation. Now he stood in Gloria's living room, eyes flicking over the legal folders and insulation tape on the windows. He didn't sit right away. I saw the posts, he said softly, and then I saw the court documents. He looked at Ruth. Tina asked me to pray for her, said you were lost, that you'd turned the church against her. Ruth didn't blink. I haven't said a word. I know, he said. That's what bothered me. He finally sat, quiet for a long time. Then, would you mind if I told people what I've seen here? Ruth didn't answer right away. Then she said, tell the truth, whatever parts of it you feel strong enough to say. He nodded again. And this time, it was slower. The bake sale started small, just a folding table outside the community center, 2 handwritten signs, and a handful of dollar bills in a glass jar. Gloria baked cinnamon rolls. Mia made mini pumpkin loaves. Ruth stayed in the background, just helping label allergens and seal containers. They didn't even say what the money was for at first. Just local meals fundraiser, but word spread. And by day's end, they'd raised $312. By the weekend, Ruth opened the donation site they linked through the meal share page. It had passed $900 overnight. The donations came with comments, names she hadn't seen in years. I remember how she shared her lunch in 4th grade. Someone like Ruth doesn't ask unless it matters. This is what family looks like. Daniel saw the page later that week. You're not just winning cases, he said, tilting his phone toward her. You're winning narrative. Ruth didn't look smug. She looked grounded. Like something had finally clicked into place. This was never about punishment, she said. It was about relief. Daniel nodded. It's starting to look like justice. At home that night, Ruth sat at the kitchen table under the soft hum of the ceiling fan. Her notebook lay open, pen balanced between her fingers. Under a new header, Community Momentum, she began charting timelines, not legal ones, social ones, volunteer rosters, cold storage requests, a plan for distributed pickups. Gloria walked in with an old mixing bowl under one arm and a stack of egg cartons under the other. We're gonna need a bigger freezer, she said. Ruth smiled. We're gonna need a bigger plan. She circled the number on the donation page, $1,843. Then she drew a line beneath it and wrote, They watched her lie. Then they watched us rise. It started with a question Ruth hadn't planned to ask. She was sitting in the corner of the county tax office, binder in her lap, flipping through receipts for the meal share fundraiser when she noticed the envelope. One of Tina's, beige, heavy stock, her old handwriting on the return label. Ruth had saved it from months ago, unsure why. She slid it from the folder and ran her thumb along the seam. Inside was a copy of a 2023 tax filing, Ruth's name, her social security number. But the signature? Not hers. It was a near match, her loops, her slant, but off just enough to hum wrong under her skin. She brought it to the clerk's window with a quiet calm that made the woman blink. I need to confirm who filed taxes under my name last year, Ruth said, and I'd like to request a certified copy of all signatures associated with the return. The clerk hesitated. Do you suspect fraud? Ruth looked her in the eye. I suspect forgery. Daniel read the copy with surgical stillness. She filed you as a dependent, he said finally, claimed caregiving credits, took deductions under a false household structure. That's felony-level fraud if proven. She signed my name, Ruth said. Without consent. He exhaled once, like a piston firing. I'll take this straight to the regional IRS rep. Quietly. No noise, no press yet. He paused. She's about to wish this stayed civil. The inquiry was opened within 3 days. Daniel didn't announce it. He didn't need to. Caleb found out first. His business Venmo account was flagged for audit. Tax records frozen. Expense reimbursements denied until further verification. He called Gloria at 8 a.m., voice cracking. I didn't know she was using Ruth's ID, he said. I just signed what she gave me. You know how Tina gets. Gloria didn't cuss, didn't scold. Just said, call a lawyer. Then she hung up. By the end of the week, all of Tina's posts vanished. Her page scrubbed clean. No devotionals, no thinly veiled attacks, no heart emoji prayer requests. Like she was trying to erase herself before someone else did it for her. But Ruth had them already, labeled, printed, filed. It wasn't just about the lies anymore, it was about the pattern. Ruth's name had become a currency Tina tried to spend behind her back, on taxes, on utilities, on social credit. Now the IRS held the receipt. The first reporter showed up at the meal-share booth during a Saturday food drive. Young, nervous, press badge from a regional paper clipped to her hoodie. She didn't ask to talk to Ruth, just waited until she was done handing out to-go bags, then approached slowly. I'm writing a piece on elder financial abuse, she said. I got your name from someone in the tax office. They said you were the only person who walked in with a binder, not a lawyer. Ruth didn't speak right away. Then, it's not just elder abuse. The reporter blinked. Sorry, it's financial abuse, family abuse, structural abuse, Ruth said. People think the damage comes in fists or screaming. But sometimes it's a signature, a lie on paper, a locked cabinet, a meal taken away. The reporter scribbled fast. What would you call what you did? Ruth paused. I called it surviving. Now I call it correction. By Tuesday, the article was out. Headline: Retiree outsmarts family fraud. How one woman exposed a silent epidemic. The story detailed the pattern: coerced signatures, false returns, canceled heat, and the fundraiser that turned sympathy into structure. It didn't name Tina directly, but it didn't have to. The town already knew. Donations jumped again. Volunteers signed up in 2s and 3s. Someone dropped off a brand new chest freezer with a sticky note, for when scraps become feasts. That night, Ruth sat on Gloria's porch as the wind kicked up leaves and the stars turned shy behind the clouds. She sipped tea from a mason jar and flipped open her notebook. A new tab waited. Federal action. She didn't rush to fill it. She just wrote one thing on the title page. This is how she signed for me. This is how I signed back. The interviews didn't happen in a courtroom. They happened in a beige government annex building on the edge of town, between a shuttered DMV and a post office that still used paper calendars. No one announced it. No sirens, just quiet arrival times, plain clothes, clipboards. Ruth went first. She wore a navy cardigan and carried her binder like always, now thick with labeled tabs: utilities, healthcare, defamation, federal, and community impact. The IRS agent had a tablet. The county fraud investigator had a pen and legal pad. Ruth handed them her records and watched as their silence shifted from procedural to impressed. Every transfer, every receipt, she said. Dates, timestamps, originals, and copies. They flipped through her notebook like it was gospel. One of them murmured, I wish every case looked like this. Caleb sat across from them 2 hours later, eyes down, sweat beading just past his collar. He'd tried to dress like a small business owner, button-down shirt, clean jeans, quiet shoes. But his hands fidgeted too much. His voice cracked once. He said things like, I didn't realize, and I thought she was handling it, and Tina said it was legal. She said she used a template. But when they showed him Ruth's certified signature and the forged one from the 2023 return, he folded like wet paper. She signed it, he said. Tina did. She said it was routine, that Ruth wouldn't notice, that it would help our taxes look clean. And you allowed it? He nodded. Yeah. And just like that, Caleb broke first. Tina didn't answer questions. She deflected, at first. But when they showed her the signed affidavit from Caleb and the printed trail Ruth had built from paper to pixel. Her silence grew longer, stiffer. Eventually, she said only this. People exaggerate when they feel left out. The agents didn't reply. They didn't need to. The fraud report was filed. The IRS issued a civil penalty, not jail time, but close. A fine large enough to burn, public enough to brand. Tina's name would now appear in a searchable database of federal offenders, next to the phrase false dependent claim and forged authorization, permanently. Ruth didn't celebrate. She just walked home from Gloria's that Friday morning, binder in one hand, her tote bag in the other, the sidewalks frosted and glinting with quiet light. She stepped through the front door, her key now the only one programmed into the smart lock, and paused. The house was spotless, counters wiped, couch vacuumed. Kitchen table cleared of Tina's old paperwork. The scent of lavender cleaner lingered in the air. She walked to the dining room and opened her notebook, just one last time. Gloria appeared a minute later, balancing a grocery bag against her hip. She looked around, took it in, nodded once. Ledger closed, she said. Case settled. Ruth smiled faintly, almost. She walked into the kitchen, took out 2 plates, set them down carefully. Then she opened the fridge and pulled out the last of the fundraiser's donated pies, pecan. She cut 2 even slices, warmed them in the oven just long enough. She handed one to Gloria, who accepted it without a word. They sat at the table, just them. No lawsuits, no threats, no cold rooms, just pie. And peace. The diner was nearly empty. Off Route 34, tucked between a tire shop and a boarded-up video store, it was the kind of place that hadn't changed its booths since the Reagan years. The vinyl seats cracked when you sat down. The lights buzzed faintly. The waitress knew your name by your coffee order. Caleb was already there when Ruth walked in, hands folded, eyes darting between the menu and the clock. His shoulders hunched in a way that made him look smaller than he was. Older, or maybe just tired from the weight he'd chosen to carry. He stood halfway when she reached the booth. Hey, Mom, she didn't return the greeting, just slid in across from him, set her tote and binder down beside her, and adjusted her coat sleeves. He sat too, fumbled for his words. I wasn't sure if you'd come. I almost didn't, Ruth said, lifting the laminated menu, not to read it, but to create space. The waitress appeared with 2 mugs, already steaming. She didn't ask what they wanted, just smiled with the worn grace of someone who'd seen every kind of family sit in that booth. Then she was gone. Caleb cradled his coffee like it was something he needed both hands to hold on to. He paused. I wanted to say I'm sorry, not in some legal sense, not for the IRS or for Tina, just me. I wanted to say it to you. Ruth added cream to her coffee, 1 packet, stirred twice. Go ahead, he exhaled. I should have said something when the heat was cut, when she used your name on the tax return, when I saw her hiding that mail. I kept telling myself I wasn't doing anything wrong, but I was. She watched him carefully, her expression neutral. What were you doing? Letting her, he said, letting her use you as a shield. And then blaming her like it absolved me. Ruth nodded slowly. And now? Now I'm in counseling. Real sessions, not online videos or worksheets. I'm trying to rebuild. Rebuild what? She asked. He hesitated. Trust. You, me, the damage. She took a long sip of her coffee. It was bitter but warm, familiar. Caleb, she said quietly, love isn't credit. He looked up, confused. It's cash only, she clarified. No IOUs, no retroactive grace. You earn it daily. You prove it by the transaction, not by the story you tell about the debt. Caleb swallowed hard. I get that now. Or I'm trying to. Ruth leaned back, not unkindly, just clearer than he was ready for. Tina built a system that taught you comfort was worth more than character. You didn't start it, but you ran with it. So now you get to start again, from the start. He nodded, eyes glossy but no tears. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a clean place to begin. Then begin, Ruth said. He fidgeted with a napkin, folding it into a square. Is there any room left in the will? Ruth reached into her bag. Not fast, not dramatic. Just a matter of fact. She slid a folded sheet of paper across the table, neat, creased once. Daniel said I didn't owe you anything, but I owe myself peace. So this is the clean line. Caleb opened it. Summary of estate. R. Ellison. Caleb Ellison, $14.82. Finalized, notarized. No revisions pending. He blinked. The receipt total, Ruth nodded. The day I bought food for myself, with my own account, my own breath, my own future. That number matters. He read it again. You're serious. Deadly. A silence stretched between them. Not hostile, just exact. Thank you for coming, she said. He looked up, startled. You mean that? I do, but this conversation doesn't reopen a chapter. It closes one. The waitress returned with the check and a wink. On the house today, you two looked like you needed something steady. Caleb smiled awkwardly. Ruth left cash anyway. She stood first. But before she walked out, she placed something beside his plate, a worn spiral notebook with half the title rubbed off. He called after her softly. What is this? Ruth didn't turn around. You'll figure it out. Caleb sat alone for a long while. He flipped the notebook open. The first page read, 2025 goals cut the cord, stay fed, stay documented. Win be heard at the bottom, in bold strokes. Goal number 6, let the silence answer. The courtroom was colder than Ruth expected. Not in temperature, though the industrial AC rattled overhead like an old train, but in atmosphere. It felt sterile, like a place where truth came to die quietly under paperwork and legalese. She sat at the plaintiff's table alone, hands folded neatly over a thin manila folder. Her lawyer had withdrawn months ago when Ruth chose to represent herself. It's just civil court, she'd said at the time. I'm not here to perform. I'm here to end things. Tina Ellison sat across from her, lacquered and lawyered up. Red blazer, tight bun, perfectly matte lipstick. Next to her, a suited man whispered something behind his hand. She nodded like royalty entertaining a servant. It didn't escape Ruth how performative Tina had become, how she carried herself like someone auditioning for sympathy. Case 1038C, the bailiff announced. Ellison versus Ellison. Judge Marquez adjusted her glasses and peered down from the bench. Her gaze was sharp. Ruth liked her instantly. Tina rose. Her lawyer rose with her. We're here today to seek restitution for emotional and reputational damages sustained over the past 18 months. He began smoothly, clicking his pen like a baton. My client, Ms. Christina Ellison, has suffered deep, ongoing psychological harm due to false accusations, the withdrawal of promised familial support, and emotional estrangement that Ruth didn't move, didn't blink, just opened the manila folder in front of her and laid 5 crisp, color-coded receipts on the table. She stood only after Tina's lawyer paused. Permission to speak, Your Honor, Marquez nodded. Proceed. Ruth stepped forward and addressed the bench. I'd like to submit documentation of gifts, financial transfers, and asset usage provided to the plaintiff over a 10-year period. These are not in dispute. They're already recorded in the previous probate mediation. She slid the receipts across to the clerk. But I want the court to see the numbers for themselves. Tina's face twitched. Let the record show, Ruth said, her voice steady, that between 2013 and 2023, I paid the down payment on their home, covered 2 years of preschool for their daughter, bailed Caleb out of debt twice, and gave them a vehicle, title-free, registered in my name. Additionally, I provided rent relief, utility payments, and grocery money totaling over $41,000. She glanced at Tina, then back at the judge. If that's emotional estrangement, I'd hate to see what love looks like. The courtroom was silent. Even Tina's lawyer didn't interrupt. Judge Marquez took a breath. Is the plaintiff refuting the financial records submitted? Tina leaned forward, lips parted. But her lawyer touched her arm lightly. We do not dispute the numbers, he said. Marquez leaned back in her chair, unimpressed. Then what exactly are you suing for, counselor? Emotional damages for no longer having free access to someone's labor and money. His mouth opened, then closed. The gavel hit the block once, clean, crisp, final. Case dismissed with prejudice. A small gasp broke the stillness. Gloria, seated 2 rows behind Ruth, leaned over and whispered with a grin that didn't reach her eyes. Meal served cold, huh? Tina's jaw flexed, but she didn't look back. Her lawyer stood abruptly and began gathering his things. Then he paused. To be transparent, he said under his breath, "This wasn't the case I signed on for. Good luck, Ms. Ellison." And with that, he was gone, briefcase snapping shut like a trap resetting. Tina sat frozen, hands tight on the table's edge. For the first time in years, her posture didn't look poised. It looked lost. Like she hadn't expected to lose, like she'd forgotten how. Ruth didn't linger. She nodded once to the judge, thanked the clerk, and walked out into the bright October sunlight with Gloria behind her. They didn't speak again until they reached the car. "Are you okay?" Gloria asked, easing into the passenger seat. Ruth's hand lingered on the steering wheel. "No, but I'm clean." Later that evening, she visited the community kitchen. The new fridge had arrived. Industrial steel, double door, humming with quiet promise. She placed a check on the counter, 4 figures and a note that read, "October, paid in full." "Another month of hot food for anyone who needs it," she told the volunteer. They smiled. "In someone's name?" Ruth paused. "Just say it's from someone who's finally free." She turned to leave, the hum of the fridge behind her. But as she stepped outside, her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. Unknown number. No voicemail. She ignored it. Then it buzzed again. Same number. This time, a text appeared. "I know what Caleb gave you. That notebook doesn't belong to him." Ruth stopped walking. Her breath caught. Because no one else, no one, should have known the notebook existed. And the message wasn't signed. The folding chairs creaked like old bones. Dozens of them lined up in neat rows inside the community center, where the lights above buzzed softly and the smell of catered meatloaf mingled with the sharp scent of floor wax. A white plastic banner fluttered on the back wall, weighted with tape and hope. "One meal turns into thousands. Honoring Ruth Ellison." Ruth stood just off stage, behind a paper-thin curtain that didn't quite reach the floor. From her view, she could see the first few rows. Seniors in pressed clothes, volunteers in matching aprons, one local news crew adjusting a boom mic with more enthusiasm than funding. 2 minutes, whispered a young staffer, clipboard in hand. Ruth nodded once, but her thoughts weren't on the speech tucked inside her purse. Her phone, silent since the anonymous text, felt like a stone in her coat pocket. She hadn't told anyone, not even Gloria, especially not Gloria. Someone tapped her shoulder. It was Gloria herself, in a crisp navy blouse and a pair of heels she hadn't worn since her own retirement party. "Smile," she said, handing Ruth a mint. "You're about to be canonized by the soup kitchen gods." Ruth took the mint but said nothing. She was listening to the rhythm of applause as the MC wrapped up her introduction. And today, we honor not just generosity, but grit. The kind of grit it takes to turn a personal reckoning into public grace. Please welcome Ruth Ellison. The applause grew, not thunderous, not viral, but real. She stepped onto the stage under fluorescence that hummed like judgment and cleared her throat. "Thank you," she said into the mic, scanning the room. Tina was there, back row, corner seat, wearing black. No makeup this time, eyes like glass, not glistening, just hollow. Next to her, Caleb. Hands folded, legs bouncing nervously. When Ruth made eye contact, he gave her a soft, single clap before joining the rest of the room. His presence wasn't performative. He wasn't here to be seen. He was here to see. Ruth drew a breath. "When I first brought a tray of sandwiches into this building," she began, "I did it for me. I was hungry. Not for food, but for purpose. For a clean start. For silence I could trust. I didn't know I'd be feeding anyone else." She paused as a few cameras clicked. "I want to thank the center for letting me bring those meals. For turning a single receipt, $14.82, into something that stretched way beyond what I ever expected. You all turned that lunch into thousands." Polite applause. "But this isn't about me. It's about everyone who's ever been overlooked, spoken over, or eaten last. You deserve more than leftovers. You deserve legacy." Applause again, louder this time. Off to the side, the reporter from KCPR Local 9 scribbled the phrase, "Leftovers to legacy." Then from the crowd, a sudden small figure darted up the aisle, Mia. 10 years old now, taller than the last time Ruth had seen her. Ponytail crooked, front teeth slightly too big. She ran straight to the stage without hesitation. "Grandma," she whispered, throwing her arms around Ruth's waist. The crowd melted. Cameras caught the embrace. But Ruth didn't see them. She saw only the girl she'd once bought a coloring book for at Walgreens, before Tina claimed even that was manipulative. Mia looked up at her. "I told my class about you. You made the news." Ruth smiled and kissed her forehead. "Then I hope I spelled my name right." Laughter rippled gently through the room. She turned back to the mic. "I've decided," she said, "to use the remainder of my pension to start a permanent endowment for this kitchen. Not just meals, but outreach, advocacy, grants for rent support. Because survival shouldn't depend on someone else's guilt. It should be guaranteed by our own dignity." Gloria stood in the back and clapped hard. "Revenge tastes best seasoned with service," she shouted, unashamed. Even Tina winced. The event ended in a flurry of flashbulbs and paper plates. People shook Ruth's hand. A few cried. Mia stuck by her side, collecting cookies and compliments with the fearless entitlement of someone still young enough to believe everything would always turn out fine. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting long amber streaks over the center's brick walls. Ruth leaned against the railing, exhaling as if she'd been holding her breath all year. Caleb approached slowly. No Mia, no Tina. "Good speech," he said. "You meant every word." "I did." He reached into his jacket and pulled something out. A single loose page, torn from the back of the notebook, she thought no one else had ever seen. "You didn't write this," he said, voice low. Ruth looked down. The handwriting wasn't hers, and it wasn't Caleb's either. At the top, in thick black ink, directive, asset recovery, initiate Q4. Beneath it, initials she didn't recognize. But the last line chilled her. Target Ruth E. Priority. 1. Leverage via Mia if needed. She met his eyes. "What the hell is this?" He shook his head. "I thought Tina was the storm, but I think she was just the weather report." Behind them, a black sedan idled across the street, windows tinted, engine running. The letter came on a Thursday. Not through the door or by certified mail, just slipped under the back gate, resting quietly on the chipped brick of Ruth's patio like a stray thought too heavy to carry. She found it after watering the planters. Hydrangeas, basil, one stubborn tomato vine still hanging on through October. The envelope was unmarked, thin, cream-colored. Her name written in an unfamiliar but careful hand. No return address. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she brought it inside. Set it on the old oak table next to her ledger envelope, the one marked in red ink. 1 meal exactly, and brewed a cup of black tea. No sugar, no cream, just heat and focus. Then she sat, took a breath, and opened it. The note was handwritten on cheap stationery, lined, ripped at the top. The ink bled slightly, as if the pen had lingered too long on certain words. "Ruth, I was cruel. I said things I believed made me strong, but all they did was make me small. You offered love, and I used it like a ladder. Then I pulled it up behind me. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know. I see it now. I see what I cost you. I see who I became. And I'm sorry. Not in the legal way, not in the public way, just in the way that matters most. T." She read it twice, then folded it slowly and slipped it into the ledger envelope. Inside, the original receipt from the diner, $14 a 2 was still crisp, barely creased. She took a black pen from the drawer, uncapped it, and wrote beneath the total, "Paid in full." Then she sealed the envelope for the last time and pressed it flat with her palm. Later that afternoon, Daniel arrived with a briefcase and a folder marked "Final." The last of the probate paperwork. The official record of what Ruth had kept, what she'd let go, what the state now considered legally hers, and no one else's. He stood in her kitchen, flipping pages with a practiced calm. "Everything's clean," he said. "No new claims, no appeals, no liens. The estate's closed." Ruth poured him a glass of lemonade. "Want to know the best part?" he asked, signing the bottom line. "What?" "No one can reopen it. Not unless they're looking to sue the clouds for raining. She smiled. Then let it rain. That evening, Gloria and Mia took over the kitchen like generals in an apron war. Pots clanged, herbs were chopped with flair, and the radio played a station stuck somewhere between old soul and new country. The scent of garlic, lemon, and warm bread clung to the air like memory. Ruth sat at the table, watching. 3 plates were already set. Mia stirred something in a pan, then called over her shoulder, "We're making lemon butter chicken, with rice. I told Nana you like real food." Gloria winked without turning around. "And we doubled the garlic. It's the armor of all emotionally healthy women." Steam curled up from the pot like a blessing. Outside, the sky bruised into twilight, the color of eggplant and fire. Ruth closed her eyes for a moment, let the sounds, the smells, the ordinary hum of a home wrap around her. No courtrooms, no strategy, no ghosts, just the sound of laughter and a chair sliding out beside her. Mia sat swinging her legs under the table. "Can I say grace tonight?" Ruth nodded. They bowed their heads. Mia began, fumbling through a few lines about thankfulness and garlic, and even the stuff that made us sad before it made us better. When they opened their eyes, the food was ready, steam rising, bread warm, hands clean. As they passed bowls and traded stories, Ruth's phone buzzed in the other room. She didn't get up, but across town, someone did. Inside a dim office lined with locked cabinets, a man in a blue suit unsealed a flat package with gloved hands. He read the contents silently, paused, then opened a drawer marked Archive, RE, and slid the envelope inside. Next to it, evidence code 991F, the notebook. Classified, unreleased. He closed the drawer, turned the lock, and picked up a phone that had no number pad, just a single red button. He pressed it. Somewhere, a file activated, and Ruth's name appeared in a new category. Asset no longer dormant. The sun rose late that morning, as if it, too, had something to think about. Ruth sat at her kitchen table in her robe, the same one she'd worn when Mia was born, when Daniel read her the first draft of the will, when she learned how much betrayal could fit into a bank statement. The air smelled faintly of rosemary from the dried bundle hanging near the window, and her tea had already gone lukewarm, but her hand didn't move toward it. In front of her sat the ledger, the one marked, 1 meal exactly. She opened it slowly, like peeling back the seal on a confession. Inside, the diner receipt still rested beneath Tina's apology. Faded now, the total still legible. 14.82. Ruth picked up a silver pen, the one Daniel had given her after court, and wrote her final line beneath the total, the ink bleeding just slightly through the page. Estate balance, $14.82 to heirs, delivered, documented, account closed. She slid the ledger into a padded envelope, sealed it with a strip of tape, and wrote in clean block letters across the front, "Final meal." No revisions. Then she stood. The community center buzzed with life. Steam wafted from warming trays. Trays clinked against serving carts, and the sound of chairs scraping against linoleum filled the air with a kind of ceremony no orchestra could mimic. Today wasn't just another meal. It was the first charity dinner served under the Ellison Endowment for Community Nourishment. Mia wore a white apron 2 sizes too big, the ends tied 3 times in a loose knot behind her. Her hands were gloved, and her smile was wide as she spooned mashed sweet potatoes onto paper plates with the focus of a surgeon. "She's good at this," Gloria said, nodding with pride. "She's better than we ever were," Ruth replied, watching from the serving line. Her own apron was cleaner than usual. It had a patch sewn near the bottom, embroidered in red. 1 meal exactly. Gloria pulled something from her pocket and pinned it to Ruth's apron with practiced hands, a gold badge with the word volunteer etched across it. Ruth looked down, amused. "Really? After all this time?" Gloria smirked. "Even legends clock in." At 6:15 the doors opened. Seniors, families, and a few who didn't know where else to be filed in. Some wore their best clothes. Others just looked relieved to be somewhere warm. In the back row, near the coffee urn, Caleb stood quietly, jacket zipped, hands in his pockets. He didn't ask for attention. He didn't even take a seat. But when Mia spotted him, she waved, and he offered a small, respectful nod. Tina was not with him. Ruth hadn't expected her. She didn't miss her. As the final plates were served and the buzz of conversation filled the room like music, Ruth stepped up to the microphone at the front of the hall. No script, no applause this time. Just the hush of people who knew what it meant to show up hungry and leave whole. Years ago, she began. Someone told me I was lucky to get one meal a day. A few murmurs, some nods. I was told that was more than I deserved. That needing help made me weak. That giving help made me foolish. She let that sit for a beat. But today, hundreds of you ate. Thousands more will. Not because someone allowed it, but because someone believed we all deserved it. I don't feed people because of pity. I feed people because I know what it's like to be starved of dignity. She looked out across the tables, then toward the back where Caleb stood. Everyone gets fed, she said softly, just not the greedy first. Applause followed, real and thick and rising from somewhere deeper than claps. Mia came and slipped her hand into Ruth's. "Can we do this again?" she asked. "We will," Ruth said, tightening her grip gently. "Every month, every year. Forever." Later that night, after the cleanup and the hugs and the final tray of cobbler had been packed for leftovers, Ruth walked through the empty kitchen, the hum of the industrial fridge echoing like a lullaby. She picked up a single white to-go box. Inside, one portion of rice, one scoop of chicken, a half slice of buttered bread, and a tiny handwritten card taped to the lid. Ruth opened the card. It read, "Reserved for Tina. One meal, as promised." She closed the lid, placed the box on the stainless steel counter, and walked out without another word. Outside, the night air was cool, clean. She exhaled and looked up at the stars, just a few visible between the streetlights and power lines, enough to count. "My daughter-in-law said I'd get one meal a day," Ruth whispered. "So I left her exactly that, priced, taxed, and written in ink." Inside, the to-go box sat untouched. But across town, a surveillance monitor blinked to life. A voice crackled through an earpiece. "Confirm. Subject has finalized her ledger." Another voice replied, this one colder. "She thinks it's over." A pause, then static. "Initiate phase 2.